I'm Birgit O'Connor, and welcome to Rock, Sand, and Sea Glass. In this program, we're going to be working on 7 different compositions and exercises and learn all sorts of new different techniques. I'll be doing shape in rocks, sand, and getting that 3-dimensional effect, how to get shadows in there and make them really pull those rocks off the paper, kelp, mussel shells, and different compositions, ripples in the sand, and sea glass. So I know you're going to have fun, so let's go ahead and get started. Once I'm satisfied with the basic shape, I'm then going to use my number 30 round natural hair brush and start applying water almost up to the pencil line. Watch as I apply my brush stroke. I'm allowing the water to come off the tip, but I'm also pressing harder to have control over how much water is on the surface, and if need be, I can easily lift it out. What I'm looking for is more of a shine on the surface, not a puddle. Otherwise, there could be too much water and the color could be diluted. So how I handle my brush is what's going to control how much water is on the surface. Then I'll return back to my test strip to see which color combinations that I like. I'm thinking I'm going to start with a burnt sienna yellow ochre mix. Then using my number 14 round sable synthetic blend, I'll start applying the color along the pencil line and let the color run into the clean water. I'll work my way almost around the entire circle, but not all the way. I don't want to make it look like I have a ring around the circle. I want to leave enough space so the white of the paper creates a highlight. Then using a darker value, I'm going to place another stroke of color just above the bottom line and allow it to run into the clean water. So I'll lift and move my paper so it helps diffuse it a little. I'm thinking that the color just isn't moving enough, or maybe it's just too dark. So using my number 30 natural hair round brush, I'm going to lift some of the color out. Even though I don't have a lot of color left, it's okay, because it leaves me with a light tint inside my stone. Then using my number 14 round sable synthetic blend, I'll reapply some color in the same area that I started working on the first time. Then I'll lift and move the color so it can blend. Notice how the color doesn't travel outside the wet area. This is how I'll get those clean lines. And if need be, I'll take my number 14 and just tidy up one side. Now before I add any texture to this, I need to let it dry just a little. Otherwise, the color's going to diffuse too much. Now for these smaller rocks, you can experiment with different values or even colors. The only thing that I'd really like you to pay attention to when you're working on these is where the highlight is. Keep the darker color on one side and the lighter color on the other. That way, it's going to look like the sun is coming from one direction. Then to give it that 3-dimensional look, that's when I'm going to add the shadows. Looking at my 3rd largest shape, which is going to be the rock in the middle, what I want to do is push part of this rock behind the one in the front and then make part of it stand out in front of the other. I've gone ahead and turned my paper so I have better access to the area that I want to work on. And since this is a slightly smaller shape, I'm going to use my round number 30 natural hair brush instead of my hockey to fill it in with clean water. Then using the same color mix of French ultramarine blue and burnt umber and burnt sienna, I'm going to use my number 20 round sable synthetic blend and apply the color to the edges. The reason why I'm using the 20 for this area is because it'll help apply the most amount of water and color in the least amount of brush strokes. What I'm trying to create is the impression or illusion of this rock being behind the one on the left. So what I need to do is have contrast, light against dark. Then to prevent the other side from looking too flat, I'm going to use my number 14 round sable synthetic blend and just pull a little color along the other edge. It doesn't have to be much, just enough to give it some shape. I think it's still a little too light, so I'll just add a little more color. It looks like I've added just a little too much water, so I'll use my number 30 to help lift out any of the excess. And I'll move and rotate my paper so the color can move. Now before I do anything else, this all has to completely dry. And once it's ready, I can start protecting the shapes with my contact paper. As I mentioned in one of the previous demonstrations, you can apply your contact paper over your sketch, or go ahead and paint all your images first and then apply your contact paper. Using a piece of tape, I'll put one on the front and the other on the back, and then pull. Then I'll place it sticky side down on top of my painting. Then using a permanent Sharpie marker, I'll outline each image. Then once each image is transferred, I'll remove the contact paper from the painting and put it back onto the backing. This way, it'll be much easier for me to cut. Then I'll carefully take my time and go around each shape. Once I have all the pieces cut, I'm then ready to start applying them back onto the painting. Then I'll use the tape technique to remove the backing from these smaller shapes as well. This simple little trick makes it so much easier to work with contact paper. Once all the shapes are covered, you're then ready to start working on your sand. Now I'll take my old toothbrush and PBO drawing gum and start spattering my masking all over the painting. It really is such a relief that I don't have to worry about my kelp, rocks, or mussel shells because it's all protected by the contact paper. And when applying the masking, I can be as messy as I want. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to let all the masking dry. Then I'll continue to add more shadows to help lift them off the paper. Remember that the shadows on one side and the highlights on the other. For instance, all the shadows here are going to be on the right-hand side. If I need to have better access to an area, I can always turn my paper, but the shadows are still on the same side. I'd also like to make them interesting, so here I've elongated it to enhance the shape of the mussel shell, and then I'll taper it as I go along the edge. And for those smaller stones or bits of glass, it's the same idea, only using a smaller brush. And to get the control that I want, I'll use either a synthetic or a sable synthetic blend. This is a number 8 synthetic. Notice how the shadow curves over the smaller rock to give it more dimension.